Loretta Lynn carried whispers for half a century. Every duet she sang with Conway Twitty, every glance they shared on stage, seemed to confirm what fans had always suspected. To many, their voices did not just blend, they bled into one another, too real, too raw, too close to be just music. But behind the spotlight, Loretta bore the weight of those rumors in silence. She was a wife, a mother, a fighter in a male-dominated industry. Yet her partnership with Conway became the one story she could never escape. Even in her proudest moments, Grammys, sold-out tours, awards stacked higher than anyone could count, the question followed her: was Conway more than a singing partner? Now at last, Loretta has confirmed the truth. But what did she really reveal about the man who stood beside her for 2 decades? And why does it change everything we thought we knew about the most legendary duet in country music? In the late 1960s, country music was at a turning point. Conway Twitty had already lived a whole career by then. He had been Harold Jenkins from Mississippi, a rock and roll star with a #1 pop hit, and a restless soul who longed for something more than the flash of jukebox singles. Loretta Lynn was already climbing her own mountain, a woman from Butcher Hollow, Kentucky, who had married young, raised children, and fought for every inch of respect she gained in Nashville. Their lives had run on separate tracks, until the day those tracks crossed backstage at a touring show. It was not a staged encounter, not a record executive's introduction, not a glittering award ceremony. Loretta had just walked off stage, still holding the weight of her performance, when a voice came from behind her. "You sing like someone who means every word." She turned to find Conway standing there, a man she knew by reputation but had never spoken to. In that one sentence, he showed her something rare, not flattery, not condescension, but recognition. He had seen what mattered to her, honesty in a song, and named it without hesitation. That moment opened a door. Instead of exchanging a quick handshake, they stayed. Loretta would later say that Conway was one of the very few men in the industry who treated her as an equal. In a business where female singers were often seen as ornaments or girl singers propped up to support the real act, Conway spoke to her like a fellow artist. They sat down and talked for over an hour. They spoke about contracts, about songs that felt alive, about the long road nights that blurred one town into another. It was not small talk. It was the kind of conversation that built trust. Trust mattered to Loretta more than most people knew. She had been fighting from the first day she stepped into the industry. Her husband, Du, had been her fiercest supporter but also her fiercest critic, and she was constantly balancing her role as a wife and mother with the relentless grind of touring. When men in Nashville tried to push her aside, she pushed back. She wrote songs about double standards, about women standing their ground, about philandering husbands and the women who refused to crumble under them. To be taken seriously by a male star of Conway's stature was no small thing. For Conway, the moment held equal weight. He had left behind a world of rock and roll fame that never fit him, and was building his second career in country music. He knew the skepticism he faced. Disc jockeys who still thought of him as a pop act, industry gatekeepers who doubted his staying power. In Loretta, he saw someone who had faced the same walls and broken through them. She was not intimidated, not easily swayed, and she carried her voice like a banner for every woman who had ever been told to stay quiet. That strength resonated with him. After that day, they kept meeting. Country music was a small world, and tours, festivals, and award shows constantly brought them back together. Each time the conversations grew longer, the laughter easier, the bond stronger. Neither of them could have known that this connection would grow into one of the most powerful partnerships country music would ever see. But the seeds were already planted, seeds of respect, equality, and a shared belief in the honesty of a song. And yet, when those seeds blossomed into music, the world did not hear just partnership. They heard something else, something that sounded dangerously like love. By the early 1970s, Conway Twitty and Loretta Lynn had already carved out reputations as solo performers. Conway was steadily proving himself as a country singer, leaving behind the shadow of his rock and roll past with hits like Hello Darlin'. Loretta was establishing herself as the most fearless female voice in Nashville, writing and singing about subjects others dared not touch. Both were secure in their own careers, but it was the decision to step into the studio together that altered everything. Their first duet, After the Fire Is Gone, arrived in 1971. It did more than climb the charts. It redefined what a male and female country partnership could be. This wasn't a novelty act or a one-off collaboration. The song told a story of longing and consequence, carried by two voices that seemed to speak directly to each other. Listeners felt as if they were eavesdropping on a conversation, not hearing a staged recording. When the single reached #1 and won the Grammy for Best Country Vocal Performance by a Duo or Group, it signaled that country's new power pairing had arrived. The hits kept coming. Louisiana Woman, Mississippi Man in 1973 painted a picture of lovers divided by geography, vowing to cross rivers and fight currents just to be together. In 1974, As Soon as I Hang Up the Phone stunned audiences with its use of a telephone call as the central device. Loretta's trembling voice on the line, Conway's calm yet distant replies. It was theater, but it felt painfully real. By the time Feelin's was released in 1975, their image as country's perfect pair was cemented. Awards mirrored the public's enthusiasm. From 1972 to 1975, they toured as co-headliners, a rarity for male-female duos. They won Vocal Duo of the Year from the Country Music Association multiple times, dominated the Academy of Country Music Awards, and collected American Music Awards as fans voted them their favorite duo year after year. Newspapers and television hosts praised their natural harmony, often describing their blend as effortless and uncanny. To many, the way their voices intertwined seemed impossible to separate from real life. That illusion fed the rumors. Every time Conway looked across the stage at Loretta during a ballad, the audience leaned in. Every laugh they shared during light-hearted songs like You're the Reason Our Kids Are Ugly felt like inside knowledge. Fans began to insist that no two people could sing about heartbreak and devotion with such conviction without living some part of it. For audiences who had followed their individual stories, the idea of a secret romance became irresistible. Interviewers did not shy away from pressing the issue. Conway was already on his third marriage, and Loretta remained with her husband Dew, despite a complicated relationship. When reporters asked if there was more between them, both offered polite dismissals. Loretta would quip that she had enough trouble managing one man at home. Conway would smile and remind everyone that they simply made good music together. Their denials were firm, yet they never bristled with anger. They understood that their own chemistry, once turned into song, was nearly impossible to explain away. Part of what made the partnership so powerful was Conway's willingness to let Loretta shine. At a time when many male singers kept female partners in the background, he often stepped aside, giving her the spotlight, lifting her verses, and allowing her to carry the emotional center of a song. Loretta, in turn, trusted Conway to balance her fire with steadiness, to give her words a grounding weight. Their roles were perfectly tuned, and that balance created a spark that audiences mistook for something intimate. As the decade wore on, the speculation only grew louder. Fans waited outside venues, scanning for signs of closeness off-stage. Gossip columns whispered about late-night dinners and long bus rides. Songs like Lead Me On and Making Believe gave listeners fuel, as if the lyrics were not fiction but confession. The line between art and life blurred, and the rumors began to overshadow even the music itself. And when the duets suddenly stopped in the late 1970s, the whispers turned into certainty. Surely something had gone wrong between country's most beloved pair, or had it? By the late 1970s, Conway Twitty and Loretta Lynn had released a string of duet albums, sold out venues across the country, and collected awards that seemed endless. To the public it looked like a formula that would never run dry. Yet just as their partnership was at its peak, the duet project slowed. Fans were left wondering why the pair who had defined country duets suddenly stepped back from recording together. Speculation ran wild. Some whispered about an argument over a song, others about jealousy on stage, and still more suggested the obvious that a secret romance had ended badly. The real reason was far simpler. Both Conway and Loretta had built towering solo careers long before they joined forces, and they knew that neither could afford to lose their individual identity. The time had come to refocus on their own work, Conway chasing a steady stream of solo number ones, Loretta pushing boundaries with daring songs that kept her at the center of conversations in Nashville. The pause in their duet work, however, left a hole in the industry. Fans who had grown accustomed to seeing them together on stage felt the absence like a breakup in the family. Concert promoters who had relied on their draw scrambled to adjust. Country radio, once flooded with their collaborations, shifted back to solo records. And all the while the public interpreted the silence as proof that something deeper had gone wrong. Behind the scenes, nothing of the sort had happened. Conway and Loretta remained close, even if their schedules no longer aligned. When they ran into each other at award shows or industry gatherings, the embraces were warm, not rehearsed. Fellow artists described them greeting one another like family members who had shared something that could never be taken away. Loretta once remarked that a hug from Conway carried the weight of every lyric they had ever sung together, a history compressed into a single gesture. Their solo years only reinforced how much they had influenced one another. Conway turned out hits like Tight-Fittin' Jeans and Don't Call Him a Cowboy, while Loretta stirred debate with The Pill and reaffirmed her roots with songs like Somebody, Somewhere. Each time they spoke to the press, their admiration for the other's work was evident. Loretta praised Conway's ability to make every line sound lived in. Conway, in turn, never hesitated to call Loretta one of the most fearless women he had ever met. By the mid-1980s, the calls for a reunion became too loud to ignore. Fans wanted to see them together again, not as a rumor-filled duo, but as the musical partners who had once redefined the genre. They recorded new material, performed on shared bills, and proved that time had not dulled their chemistry. The harmonies slipped back into place as if no years had passed at all. For many, it was proof that whatever had pulled them apart professionally was never personal. Still, the rumors did not fade. If anything, the reunion brought them back into sharper focus. Audiences looked at the pair, older now, seasoned by decades of success and struggle, and read every glance as a coded message. To fans, it seemed impossible that two people could share that much history, that much closeness, without crossing the line. To Conway and Loretta, it was simple. They had built something that did not need to be explained or defended. It was music, and it was friendship, and that was enough. But time does not slow for legends. As the 1990s approached, Conway's health began to falter, and fate would draw Loretta back into his life at the very moment the world was about to lose him. As the 1990s opened, Conway Twitty was still a fixture on the road. For decades he had built his reputation not only on chart-topping singles, but on an unwavering work ethic. City after city, year after year, he filled concert halls, determined never to let the fans down. Yet behind the curtain, the years of constant touring were catching up to him. Those close to Conway noticed his energy slipping. Dizzy spells, fatigue, and rising blood pressure began to shadow his once unstoppable pace. He brushed the concerns aside. To Conway, stepping away from the stage meant stepping away from life itself. His fans had carried him from the rock and roll clubs of the 1950s to the country arenas of the 1980s. Every ticket sold, every standing ovation felt like a promise he refused to break. Even as his body warned him otherwise, Conway pressed on, convinced he could outrun the toll of age and illness. That illusion shattered in early June of 1993. Conway had just performed in Branson, Missouri, still pushing through exhaustion, when sharp stomach pains struck him during the overnight ride back to Nashville. At first he waved it off as something minor, but the pain intensified until he collapsed on his tour bus. Crew members rushed him to Cox South Hospital in Springfield, where doctors discovered a ruptured abdominal aortic aneurysm. Emergency surgery was his only chance, but the situation was already critical. In a twist of fate no one could have scripted, Loretta Lynn was in that same hospital at the very same time. Her husband, Oliver Doolittle Lynn, was battling heart complications and diabetes. Loretta had been keeping vigil by his side, drained from days of worry, when she learned Conway had been admitted. The shock was overwhelming. Two of the most important men in her life, both fighting for survival, only floors apart. Loretta moved between the rooms in disbelief. One moment she was sitting with Doolittle, steadying his spirits. The next she was rushing to check on Conway's condition. At one point, a chaplain approached her with gentle words. If she wanted to see Conway, now might be her last chance. Loretta walked into the room, took his hand, and urged him not to give up. She reminded him of the music they still had, the life he had always fought to keep. For a brief moment, it seemed her voice might reach him. Then she returned upstairs to Doolittle, carrying hope in one room and dread in the other. Minutes later the news came. Conway Twitty had passed away in the early morning hours of June 5, 1993. He was only 59. For Loretta the weight was unbearable. She had not just lost a friend and partner, but someone who had walked beside her through decades of music, someone who had given her a space on stage where she could stand as an equal. The country music world reeled. Tributes poured in. Radio stations played his greatest hits in rotation, and fellow artists spoke of a man who had shaped the sound of modern country. Conway was laid to rest in Gallatin, Tennessee, under his birth name, Harold Jenkins, inside a red granite vault that marked the end of a life lived at full volume. At his funeral, Loretta sat in silence with her family, shattered by grief yet unwilling to speak publicly. Those close to her said she seemed hollowed out, as though the music itself had been taken from her. And yet, even in death, the rumors followed him. Fans wanted answers to the same question they had asked for 20 years. Were Conway and Loretta ever more than partners? The truth, at last, was about to be spoken. For as long as they sang together, Conway Twitty and Loretta Lynn carried more than music on their shoulders. They carried suspicion, longing, and the constant hum of gossip. Fans could not accept that two people could stand so close, sing so tenderly, and not be in love. Even after Conway's passing, the rumors refused to fade. Letters poured in to Loretta, condolences often followed by the same question: was it true? Were they ever more than duet partners? Loretta chose silence in those early months. Grief was still raw, and she had no desire to feed speculation. She told those who asked only that Conway had been her partner, her friend, and that kind of bond was rare in any life, let alone one lived in public. But silence leaves space for imagination, and imagination can be louder than truth. It wasn't until Conway himself spoke, in one of his final interviews, that the story began to settle. Asked once again about Loretta, Conway gave the most candid answer of his career. He admitted their closeness, admitted that the chemistry fans felt was real, but he drew the line with clarity. What bound them was not romance but respect, not scandal but trust. He explained that their performances felt intimate because they were meant to sell a song about love. Two singers had to believe it together, even if that belief ended when the curtain fell. For Conway, the partnership was sacred precisely because it never crossed that line. Loretta later confirmed those words in her own way. She acknowledged that Conway was the rare man in Nashville who treated her as an equal from the beginning, who never tried to control her or overshadow her. She credited him with giving her space to shine in duets when most men would have taken center stage. That, she said, was love of a different kind, the kind built on loyalty and artistic respect. In her eyes, Conway was not a secret lover but a musical partner who made her stronger, safer, and more confident every time they stepped into the studio together. The rumors, however, had endured for so long that the truth seemed almost too simple. Fans wanted a hidden romance, a story of passion concealed behind lyrics. Instead, they were given something subtler but perhaps more enduring, proof that a man and a woman could build a partnership in music without betrayal or scandal. For Loretta, confirming that truth was not about protecting reputations, it was about honoring what they truly shared. She did not shy away from the depth of her feelings. Loretta admitted she loved Conway. Not in the way gossip magazines insisted, but in the way one artist can love another's courage, talent, and spirit. She loved that he respected her voice, that he stood by her when Nashville doubted her, that he gave her space to sing about women's truths without judgment. She loved that he never asked her to change. That was the foundation of their bond, and she would not let anyone twist it into something smaller. When Loretta finally spoke openly, the effect was striking. Some fans expressed disappointment, as though the lack of romance diminished the magic they had felt. Others, however, understood the rarity of what she described. In a world obsessed with scandal, the purity of their partnership became its own legend. Their story was not one of secret affairs but of unwavering respect, and it was that respect that made the music timeless. And so the question that haunted them for decades was answered at last. The truth was never about hidden kisses or late-night trysts. It was about two voices, two lives, and a partnership so strong it needed no rumors to survive. In the end, Loretta Lynn and Conway Twitty gave country music more than a catalog of hits. They gave it a model of partnership built on trust, equality, and respect. The rumors that followed them never defined their story. What defined it was the way their voices carried each other, the way their friendship endured, and the way they proved that love does not always mean romance. Sometimes it means loyalty, honor, and the courage to let another shine. For more emotional stories, check out this video.